Hello and welcome back. I'm Ken LaSalle. I'm reading from my book, The Day We Said Goodbye, A Meditation on Acceptance. And today we're going to read chapter 3. But before we do so, I've had my hair in a tail this whole time, and it gets to be a little much, so you'll appreciate if I just let it go. My hair has become its own. I believe it's now a territory of the United States. They're going to be voting on statehood soon. It's just I haven't been able to get it cut during this whole pandemic nonsense, and so the nonsense continues. So, hi. Today, as I mentioned, we're reading chapter 3 of The Day We Said Goodbye, and chapter 3 is called A Chance to Say Goodbye, July 26th, 2008. I will remind you that the previous chapter was from July 11th, 2008. So this is 15 days later. Let's find out what happened. Now, I'm going to remind you, I haven't read these in years. So the last chapter got to be a little emotional, and I'm afraid this one will as well. So please bear with me as I read some rather personal stuff that I can't believe I'm reading to everyone on the internet. But there you go. I can't believe I put it in a book. But hey. So, life has a tendency of moving along no matter what may be happening to us personally. My dad grew worse and worse, sicker and sicker in Arizona, while in California, I kept going about my life. I was trying to fit into a job that was never a good fit to begin with, and learning with every day the reason why. For instance, I had proposed a paperless workflow to a group of managers who depended on paper for excuses why they were so lousy at their jobs. Without paper documents, they couldn't lose things when they needed documents to disappear. I was so focused on what I thought was, I bit my lip. I was so focused on what I thought was an improvement to the system that I did not realize that I was threatening their way of life. I was too busy just trying to make a life for myself. I rode my bike to work. I played World of Warcraft. Vicky and I lived our lives as if nothing would get in the way. July 26th was another Saturday that couldn't come fast enough. We did our shopping for the week. We walked our dog, a Shiba Inu named Suki. We barbecued some steaks and watched some television and got a little drunk on some good wine. And then Blanche called. After I answered with my normally cheerful, "Hey, Blanche," I could tell something was wrong, and the sickness and approaching death of my father that she lived with every day found its way back into my life. And greeting her so cheerfully, I felt like an idiot. Of course, I had known my father was still sick, but normal life is so enticing. It makes you forget. It turns you away from the important things, and so often we are happy to be so turned. Blanche said, "If you want to say goodbye to your father, you should probably come out soon. I don't think he has a lot of time left." "Of course," I told her. "I'll come out tomorrow morning." After I hung up with her, I called Richard to let him know what was going on. Then I called Dwight. Dwight and I had been close once, but as we grew older, something always seemed to get in the way of any understanding of each other we had once possessed. I'd say it was because he was turning into the same insensitive, hard-nosed kind of jerk my dad had been before age and sickness had eroded his rough edges. Actually, I would say it was far worse than that. When Dwight said, "Don't go out there, Dad's fine, he's just faking to get attention," I nearly exploded. "Attention, Dwight?" I shouted. "What do you think he is, a 10-year-old kid?" I hung up and paced our kitchen, ranting about how I wanted to wring Dwight's neck. But Vicky calmed me down, reminding me that I didn't know the whole story and that maybe Dwight was in denial, and anyway, that didn't change anything. I would still drive out to Arizona the next day. I wouldn't miss another opportunity to say goodbye to my father. Richard called me back after a while, and when he told me that he'd just spoken to Dwight, my anger flared up again. I can't believe he would say that about his own father. His own father. "I think he's taking this pretty hard," Richard explained. "This is just how he's dealing with it, that's all." "How can you make excuses for him?" I asked. "I'm not making excuses," Richard said. "I'm just trying to be fair." I told him I didn't think that was necessary just then either. "He's my brother," Richard said. Wow. Okay, now there's something I hadn't considered. Dwight and Richard are only my half-brothers through my dad, but they are brothers through Dad and Blanche, just as Keith and I are brothers through my mom and dad. But Keith and I had been through so much over the years. Even though we were finally at a place where we could talk like friends, I couldn't honestly say I would be as fair to Keith as Dwight was being, as Richard was being with Dwight. It was just foreign to me. I didn't understand. But I knew Richard was right. His calm level-headedness served to show me exactly what I was not. I said, "Fine, you be fair. I'll still think he's being an ass." I drove out of Anaheim earlier the next morning than I had the last time I went to Arizona. I gave Vicky a kiss in the dark and hit the ugly, snarling traffic of the 10 just as the sun was going up. I listened to the Moody Blues in the Firesign Theater on one compact disc after another as the traffic crawled through Beaumont and Banning, Palm Springs, and Indio. I tore through the border town of Blythe, not stopping for my usual Frosty from Wendy's or even for a pee. It was Sunday, July 27th. And I knew I'd have to turn around and come home that night to get to work the next day, so I knew I couldn't waste any time. I pulled up in front of Dad and Blanche's house in a heat more abysmal than the one I'd felt just weeks before. Boy, do I hate Arizona in the summer. But then I can't imagine anyone enduring it out of love. When I walked into the house, I realized quite a bit had changed. Dad was lying in a hospital bed, which was positioned in the middle of the living room. And he wasn't moving. "He's sleeping," Blanche told me, having greeted me at the door. We didn't get inside too far before I realized she was all business. "Listen, can I ask you a big favor?" I hate to say I contemplated saying no, but I did. Heck, I contemplated saying, I left something in Anaheim. I'll be right back. I said, of course. What do you need? It's just been such a rough couple of weeks. I haven't even had a chance to buy groceries. Would you mind if... And it dawned on me just what Blanche must have been going through. She was taking care of my father by herself, watching him, looking after him with no help, week after week. I also knew things were probably worse than I was imagining. For that matter, I was pretty sure I didn't want to know. Yes, I said, go take care of whatever you need to. I've got your phone number. If anything happens, he'll probably remain asleep. He does that. I just need to pick up a few things, run just a couple of errands. I'll be back in a couple of hours. Sure, I said, no problem. Even as I said this, of course, I was wondering what I had gotten myself into. I'm horrible around sick people. I get too empathetic, which is short for I freak out. I was no good around Megan when she was sick. I get nervous inside of hospitals. How would I manage with my dad literally dying before me in a hospital bed? Fortunately, I had brought my laptop computer along, and denial never had a better friend than free cell. I kept telling myself, he's just sleeping. He's just sleeping, as I played game after game. The free cell addiction was all Blanche's fault, by the way. Blaming her helped a bit. It was my excuse as I played game after game. You see, during one of my previous visits to their home, I had found a strange grid of numbers on a piece of paper. Some of the grid was crossed out while other boxes remained unchecked. Oh, that's for free cell, Blanche explained. Your father made up these grids so I could beat every game. Now, I had played more than my share of that card game, and I had my suspicions. Aren't there some games that are unbeatable? I asked. She shook her head. There's no game that's unbeatable if you try hard enough. And don't you just know that stuck inside my head? After Blanche told me that, I was a free cell playing fool, determined to beat those games I had previously felt were unbeatable. And I sat there and I played game after game, even after my father had woken up and turned on the television. An old movie played with the volume very low. I can't remember now if it was The Angel and the Bad Man or if it was The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. But I know it was one of my favorite John Wayne films. My card playing slowed and we watched the movie together. I wasn't sure if he even knew I was there or if he was even awake. At some point, he fell back to sleep because when Blanche returned with her arms full of groceries, she asked, "Has he been asleep the whole time I was gone?" "Well, he turned on the TV," I said. "We watched a John Wayne movie." "He does that," she said. "You want to help me feed him?" It was that conversational tone that caught me off guard. It was almost as if she was asking, "Would you like a glass of tea?" I said yes, before I even realized what the question was. And then I kicked myself for it. Of course, listen, I know this isn't making me sound like the most caring individual. Maybe I wasn't. I just wanted my father back, the father I knew and could complain about. Dad was never a good conversationalist. He was a right-wing blowhard. His jokes stunk. I wanted that dad back. The man who lay in the hospital bed before me scared me. Help me position his head, Blanche was saying. She held my father, helping move him as I moved the bed into an upright position. This woke him up. Blanche? He asked, his words coming feebly through his half-opened mouth. Hi, honey, she said. It's time for lunch. Her tone caught me completely by surprise. She was so understanding, so okay with things. I just wanted to shout to my father's withered form, "Oh my God, you're dying!" Granted, it probably wouldn't have helped all that much. I talked to Sean about this sometime later on because I had heard the same tone Blanche was using coming out of his mouth. He'd used the same tone when Megan was at her worst. You do it so they'll be comfortable, he told me. It's not going to help to freak them out, too. But don't you hate it? Didn't you hate having to sound like everything's okay when everything is anything but okay? I asked. He gave me a serious look. Sean hardly ever gives anything or anyone a serious look. This was years after his wife had died, but I could see the question tearing at him. Of course you hate it. You hate every minute of it. Ken's here, Blanche told my father. He turned his head, and I swear he looked as bad as any survivor of Auschwitz. Only he wasn't going to survive. The doctors had given up guessing. Nobody was telling Blanche he was healthy anymore. They'd just given up and left my father to die. Hello, son, my father whispered, and I replied, Hi, Dad. Reading this into a microphone is a lot easier than reading this into a camera. When I did the audiobook for this, it was not as difficult as this. I have to admit, the rest of the day was a blur. In the years since my father's passing, the pain of that day just wiped that memory right out of my brain. I remember watching as Blanche fed my father his lunch. I remember her offering me something to drink. And the hours passed and the minutes of our lives passed, and I just didn't know what to do. The next thing I knew, the sun was going down. I had to be at work the next day and could not afford to take any time off. But one fact remained clearly in my head, and that was just how badly I had mismanaged the uniquely horrible task of saying goodbye to my father the last time I had visited. This time would be the last. Of this, I was certain. I spent a great deal of time working up the courage to give my father and myself the kind of goodbye we both deserved. I got up from my seat and let Blanche know I had to go, and we shared an embrace. Then I went to my dad. He lay in the bed, half asleep, in pain, weak, dying. I took his hand. Dad, I've got to go now. Okay, son, he said, his voice so tired. Or was it more than just tired? I had to force the next words out, not because I didn't believe them, but because I knew it would be my last time saying them. You get some rest, okay? I love you. I love you too, son, he said. Then his grip grew stronger as I tried to pull my hand away. I'm so sorry about how things turned out. I should have been there for you. I was a horrible father. I'm so sorry. To hear my father say those words, they just tore me apart. How I had longed to hear them over the years. My mother and father had split when I was 5, and though I will never really understand what went on between them, I became the kid who grew up without a father. You know, back when that meant something. Growing up, there had been so many times when I had wanted to tell my dad he was a rotten father. Now, hearing my dad say these words, I was so grateful to myself for never having said them. And I wished I could have been able to go back in time so I could save my dad from these regrets. Regrets I was only beginning to realize that he had. Those words made him so human to me. And I don't think he had ever really seemed that way before. You have nothing to be sorry about, I said, making my best effort not to cry. That's just the way things happened. You goofed. We all goof. It's okay. It is. Okay? I love you. And I did. And I felt so much better having said that. It was like finally, after all these years, we had finally acknowledged the truth of our lives. If it had come before, years before, I couldn't imagine how things would have changed. But he would have been too stubborn, and I would have been too stupid, or vice versa. And I think he would have argued with me about it too. But I had the advantage over him, and he knew it. He was too weak to argue. And I was right. Goodbye, son. Goodbye, Dad. And I was gone. I drove straight out of Arizona. I didn't stop for anything, not for food, not for gas. I made a beeline for the border, trying to put my sorrow and all of my regrets behind me. All the times Dad and I had spoken as though we'd have plenty of tomorrows. All of the times I had acted as though he mattered less to me just because he hadn't been in my life very much. I saw the sign for the California border. I saw the rest stop at Quartzsite. I felt something catch in my engine. And then I felt it catch again. I had run out of gas. Of course, I said, parking my car with the last of its fumes as I dialed the auto club. They wouldn't come out for hours, and I would be stuck there in the heat of the middle of the night. I would call Sean and tell him about my dad, and I would call Vicky and apologize for the $20 I was about to pay for a gallon of gasoline. Nothing was easy. Nothing was ever easy. And that is chapter 3. I think of my dad a lot. I sometimes remember things in different context from the way I remembered them before. Especially old things that I haven't thought about in years and years and years. They'll pop into my head, and I will remember having thought so little of my dad at the time, and then I will remember that later in life, we acknowledged that we were both human beings and fallible and flawed and prone to mistakes. So I'm so glad I got to say goodbye to him. And I'm glad I got to share that with you. And I hope you'll pick up The Day We Said Goodbye, A Meditation on Acceptance by me, Ken LaSalle, in ebook, paperback, and yes, audiobook. And that's it. Thanks for coming around, and I hope you subscribe, click the like button, and connect with me on all that social media business on the screen.